Hey everyone, it's Mostly Casual Commander. I'm BK, and we have a fun game of EDH for you today. We have Tameshi, Reality Architect, Kodama of the West Tree, Ezuri, Renegade Leader, and the Dragon as our commanders today. Thank you very much, Dutch M, for supporting us on Patreon, link in the description. So let's get right into it. Kyle drops a Hallowed Fountain tapped as his land for turn, and plays a Lotus Petal for 0, getting him a single-use mana ramp, followed by a Mishra's Bauble, allowing him to draw an extra card and peek the top of his opponent's library. Over to Kovacs, he plays a Forest as his land for turn and says go. On to Busterkins, also a Forest, and he casts Llanowar Elves because the Elves win games. Over to J-Man, he drops Bloodstained Mire as a land. He taps and sacks it, goes and fetches up a Rogran Triome. On to his end step, Kyle activates his Mishra's Bauble, looks at the top of Busterkin's library, and draws an additional card when it's his turn. He plays an Island as his land, followed by Azorius Signet, giving him some additional mana ramp action. On to Kovacs' turn, he plays another Forest, and taps the heck out of those lands to cast a Roaring Earth, giving him +1/+1 counters on creatures or vehicles when his lands enter the battlefield. Another Forest hits Busterkin's battlefield, followed by an Elvish Archdruid, not only pumping his elf team, but also getting him a pretty significant mana ramp. Misty Rainforest hits J-Man's battlefield, and he fetches up a Stomping Ground. We'll have it enter the battlefield untapped by paying 2 life. He casts a very fancy Arcane Signet. With that, he passes the turn over to Kyle. He plays Inventor's Fair as a land for turn, and then casts the Reality Chip, allowing him to start peeking the top of his library, and it gets even better when he reconfigures that onto a creature. Over to Kovacs, a third Forest enters the battlefield, and his commander, Kodama of the West Tree, makes an appearance on the battlefield. Over to Busterkin's turn, he plays a Vanquisher's Banner, and Kyle has something else to say about that. He memory lapses it, putting that back on the top of Busterkin's library instead of into the graveyard. And with that, Busterkin's passes. J-Man plays Training Center as his land for turn, which will enter untapped. He also plays another fancy card, a Commander's Sphere, giving him more ramp or a card draw. On to Kyle's turn, Inventor's Sphere triggers, gaining him a life, and he casts his commander, Tameshi, Reality Architect, which can get him some card draw and also bounce things at sorcery speed. He plays a Scalding Tarn, fetching an island, and then he reconfigures the Reality Chip on his commander using his Lotus Petal. Another Forest hits the battlefield, giving a +1/+1 counter to Kodama. Then Kovacs equips Boar Umbra onto it as well, making it a big scary commander threat. He swings at Kyle and deals 7 commander damage. This also triggers Kodama, getting him another Forest and another counter on his commander. Elvish Guidance is the play on Busterkin's side of the board, getting him even more mana ramp action with his elves. He casts his commander, Ezuri, Renegade Leader, aka an Overrun on a Stick. Boseiju, who endures, is J-Man's land for turn, followed by the Smothering Tithe, one of our favorite cards here on Mostly Casual Commander. You could check it out in a number of our other videos, and you should definitely subscribe. So anyway, Kyle casts Careful Study, allowing him to draw 2 cards and then has to discard 2 cards. This will trigger Smothering Tithe twice, getting J-Man some more treasure. He plays a Command Tower as his land for turn, followed by Inventive Iteration. This will allow him to bounce a thing right now, get him a card in his hand one way or another, and it can flip to become a 3/3 flyer. He bounces Kodama to Kovacs' hand. This breaks Boar Umbra, and then Kovacs recasts his commander, Kodama of the West Tree, from his hand this time. On to Busterkin's turn, he draws and replays his Vanquisher's Banner, hoping that it doesn't get countered this time. And it doesn't, congrats. Spectator Seeding hits the battlefield for J-Man, which of course enters untapped. Then he casts Joyra's Familiar, reducing the cost of all of his historic spells by 1 generic mana. He then uses his large hoard of treasures to cast Chromatic Orrery, and now that his mana is any color, he taps that and casts Old Gnawbone with its cost reduction of Joyra's Familiar, as well as the Dragon. He gets a big 7/7 flyer that gives him more treasures. Kyle's Saga upticks after his draw step, returning his Lotus Petal to his hand. He then recasts Lotus Petal and sacks it, generating 1 blue mana to cast Mystical Tutor. So he will go and find an instant or sorcery card, reveal it. In this case, it's a Time Warp. So he will shuffle up and put Time Warp on top of his library. And with the reality chip, he can play it off the top of his library, and he gains an additional turn, which is like our favorite thing for our opponents to do in this game. But wait, there's more. A Mystic Sanctuary hits the battlefield untapped because of his islands, which will return Time Warp to the top of his library. He then activates Tameshi's ability, bouncing Mystic Sanctuary to his hand, drawing a card, and returning Lotus Petal to the battlefield.
And then I'll go to my next turn.
So on to Kyle's second turn 6, Inventive Iteration flips over into a 3/3 flyer. J-Man decides to activate his Commander Sphere to draw a card, and then Kyle demonstrates the loop again of playing Time Warp to gain an additional turn after this one. He drops his Mystic Sanctuary, again untapped, returning Time Warp to the top of his library, activating Tameshi to bounce Mystic Sanctuary, drawing a card, and getting Lotus Petal back out onto the battlefield.
And then I go to my next turn.
Yeah, laugh it up, fuzzball. So again, Kyle has a successful loop demonstrated with the current cards that he has. His opponents do not have any sort of interaction that can interrupt this process, so he will be drawing all of the cards from his library into his hand slowly over the turns. He will have to discard them until he has no library remaining, and with that, he will end up casting his win condition, which is Jace, Wielder of Mysteries. If he would draw a card while library has no cards in it, he would win the game instead. So he will activate the +1 ability on Jace. He will have 2 cards milled from the top of his library, and then he will be forced to draw a card, which of course he cannot do because there are no cards left. So with that, he knocks all 3 of his opponents out simultaneously, and Kyle takes that quick victory. Job well done, sir. Congratulations, what an interesting Azorius combo deck. So let us know what you thought of this game in the comments. Any questions, comments, or concerns we'd be happy to address when we can. Please like the video if you did, subscribe, and as always, thank you very much for watching.
Yeah, let's do this one.
Oh yeah.